Good morning, everyone, from the beautiful state of Florida. This is Professor Toto, and I did not do a live show last night. I am on vacation, and I was going to take off the entire week. We don't ever do that, ever. But, as you know, we had a Supreme Court ruling that came down yesterday, and it's a pretty important ruling, so I knew that I needed to go live and address it. So Harper Vs Moore. Many of you know that we have been following that case for quite a while. And the ruling yesterday was definitely not what we had all hoped for. We were hoping that they would rule in favor of the Harper Vs Moore. However, the next day is always better. It gives us time to look at the whole picture. It gives us time to examine the ruling. And I'm happy to tell you today that the ruling is not bad at all. The ruling is actually in our favor. And I'll explain how that is. Okay. How many of you remember on January the 6th, whenever we truly wanted Mike Pence to do the right thing? And we were all so disappointed that he did not do the right thing. Well, we found out as the next day or two rolled by that if Pence would have ruled in our favor, that Donald Trump would have been impeached the next day and never been able to run for president again. So we saw that God gave us a bigger miracle than we even prayed for. And then again, in the midterms, how many of you remember we prayed for a red wave? We wanted a red wave. Remember that? But you'll also remember that if we had gotten a red wave, it would have been horrible. You know why, right? Because all of our people, Matt Gaetz, Roy Chip, MGT, all of them, Baybert, would have been forgotten. They would have been put to the side, and the Freedom Caucus would have had no power over politics or over legislation. So again, we thanked the Lord for not answering our prayer. We thanked Him. Thank you, Father, for knowing what we need more than we know. Well, He's done it again with Harper Vs Moore. I'll explain. The last thing we ever want is unchecked power in the United States. We have three co-equal branches of government, and they are there to balance one another. All right? For decades, we've had no problem with the court making sure that laws passed by the legislature were constitutional. You know, legislators are not constitutional experts. Okay? So if they make a law or a ruling, it needs to be checked by some power to make sure it's not violating our constitutional rights. I'll give you an example. Let's say that we have a Democrat legislature, and they make a rule that in the election, no one that does hate speech can vote. Well, that would be me, right? Because they consider my speech hate speech. But the legislature passed that law, and so I can't do anything about that. No, it's never been that way in America. There's always, you should always be able to go to a court to make sure that the law is constitutional. Now, we were hoping and praying for one thing, but let me show you what the Lord has done for us. The ruling that came down yesterday said more than most people realize. For the first time, the Supreme Court made a ruling with these words specifically stated in the ruling: that the courts do not have unilateral power to create law. And he went on to say that the court must be limited and he gave all the regulations of what the court cannot do. against legislation. Now, what did John Roberts and his court do? They just opened up a Pandora's box. Because now, every ruling by the legislature, both sides can now go to court and make sure it's constitutional. And the court is now limited in the decision that the court makes. The court is now limited as to what they can or cannot do. In other words, the days of them creating law over our elections is over. Because now a lawyer can stand before a federal court and appeal to this Supreme Court ruling that the courts are not allowed to interfere with the legislation if it is constitutional. So, folks, sometimes you got to thank God for unanswered prayers. Sometimes you've got to thank Him for working in ways that you didn't even comprehend. So, ladies and gentlemen, nothing to hold your head down about. It is actually a great ruling, and I think we'll all be pleased with it at the end of the day. Also, before I go, and I'm going to try to do a class tomorrow night. I'm not guaranteeing it, but I am going to try. 3 times Donald Trump has told you I did nothing wrong. The first time in the Russia hoax. The second time in the Ukrainian phone call. And the third time concerning the documents. I've done nothing wrong. How did the first 2 turn out? Right? Don't worry about the third one. It'll turn out the same way. Have a good day, everybody.